Welcome everyone to Tech on the Side. I'm Jason P. Heisel, otherwise known on the internet as the Tech Spec, and with me as always is Cindy Doder. Welcome, Cindy.
Hey everybody.
Hey Doder, what do you think? Let's talk about Google Classroom today.
That would be great. Such a great tool.
Awesome. Well, first and foremost, what is Google Classroom? And my simplest explanation is it's a learning management system, very similar to Edmodo, but it's built right inside of Google. Doder, I'm just wondering, why would people or should people even consider using this tool?
Well, Jason, I think the biggest thing is that it connects all those Google products into one place so you can take advantage of all the features. The big piece for me is it takes care of file management. That's always a huge piece for me. Instead of you creating folders and files and sharing them out, Classroom actually creates those folders for you, and then when you create the files, you can share or disperse documents directly from Classroom, so that's huge. A couple other points. One, it always tracks whether or not your students have turned things in. You actually see that roll over. It actually counts them out right from Classroom, which is a great thing. And unlike sharing directly in Drive, there's no automated email that fills up your inbox when you share and assign with students, which we all hate, you know, those 9,000 emails. But it still gives you, Gmail works really well with the other products, so it does notify you if that's part of how you want to manage it, so I think that's a good thing.
I think that's great. Should we maybe take a look at it, since we're doing all this talking about it?
Yeah, please, that'd be great.
All right, let me just switch over to my Screencast. So I've got what it looks like when you go to classroom.google.com. If you've never set one up, it's going to just say, get started using Google Classroom. I believe when your students go, they'll see this also. Their student, they'll obviously click student, and for today we'll click teacher to show teachers how to set it up. It's pretty self-explanatory. Create a class or join a class. Those are your two options. Students will just have the option to join a class. Like I said earlier with Edmodo, you could always give out class code and a student can join a class. For this show, I will just do create a class, give it a name. You can give it a name and you can give it a section, and that will come into play later when you're trying to find information associated with said class. I've often referenced, if you're teaching the same subject, like you'd have Tech 101, you might say first hour. I had some teachers that were just doing first hour and second hour for their classroom name, which can be a little confusing for the students later on when they're looking at all of their different stuff. So I gave it a title, name, and hit create. And immediately I have my classroom being created. Few things to notice, there's that class code, so you can always manually add your students if you want, but what I have found, there's been a lot of success with if you just have the class code written up on the board and students go to create or join a class, they punch in that code, and then once you have all your kids in there, you can disable that code so that no one else can join, which is pretty nice. The other couple of options that are important to point out is we have announcements and assignments, and later we'll have Christy Burton talk to us a little bit more about them and how she's used those two different things. Primarily, when you have an assignment, you can create and attach a Google Doc, and when you attach a Google Doc or a video or etc., any of those things, you can, when it's an assignment, you can make a copy for each student. When it's an announcement, you cannot make a copy for each student. Like I said, once you go in for the first time, it'll kind of walk you through this entire process of using it, so I'm not going to do that here today. And just a real quick thing here, if you notice up at the top, this is where it says change theme if you want to change the way it looks, which I know a lot of people like to do right off the bat, so it's not, every site's not looking the same. They have some preset gallery photos for you to choose from. One feature I'd love to see is if I could upload my own picture, but presently I can just pick any of these pictures they have. That's it in a nutshell. I would encourage you to go to Google Classroom if you have not already and sign in and create a class and start playing around with it to learn best how to use it. We have Christy Burton here with us today, who's going to talk a little bit about how she has used it in her class with her students this year. So here's Christy Burton.
Thanks for having me.
Great. So since you've been using classrooms, I have a few questions for you, if you don't mind. First one I have is, have you ever used a digital classroom management tool before?
I used Edmodo a little bit last year, but mainly just as a place for students to find documents and things that we did in class.
Gotcha, great. And what has Classroom done or replaced for you?
It's been much easier to share information with the class all at once, making assignments and collecting them digitally has worked very well, and I guess really it's just made the classroom work a little bit smoother, less time handing things out. We've kind of gotten into a routine with it.
Gotcha. So tell me a little bit about your experience with Google Classroom so far.
So started day one pretty much. The kids got logged in, and there were really no problems. It went pretty smoothly. The kids really have taken to it, and I've made several assignments in there that have been digital, some of them that have not been. We've done some discussions. Learned along the way that they can kind of create things, and they have a classroom folder, which makes it very easy for them to find their things even on the outside when they're not within classroom.
Great. So it sounds like it's been pretty good so far.
Yes.
So what tips or advice would you share with a teacher thinking about using Google Classrooms?
For sure, sit down and demonstrate with the whole class at once. Walk them through things, showing them each of the places where they can find different their documents, the folder, the About section, where it has a folder which has lots of things that you post in there. And definitely be very clear about the announcement stream and what its purpose is, and what's acceptable there and what's not, and what your expectations are surrounding it.
Great. And is there anything else you'd like to share with us about using Google Classroom?
I don't know. It's a great tool, and I think that once lots of us in the building are using it, the kids will even like it even more.
Great tip. Thanks for joining us, Christy. I appreciate your time.
You're welcome.
All right. See you around. All right. Special thanks, Christy Burton, for doing that interview and sharing that information with us. I'm sure we will be asking you more questions about it in the future, and I'm sure you can ask Christy Burton any sorts of questions you have about Google Classrooms and how she's used it. Now, Cindy, Christy shared with us how she's been using it, but I feel like you've been using Google Classroom in a really interesting way with teachers using it as a PD tool. Would you mind sharing and showing us a little bit of how that looks?
Sure, Jason, I'd be happy to. I think what we'll do is I'll just share my screen. We'll go to a screenshot of the training I did with some teachers a few weeks ago. So here is the Google 2 training class that I did as an introduction to some of the upper level tools in Google. And what I decided to do was, since Classroom was being introduced, go ahead and just use Classroom live with the teachers in the training session. But I also thought it might be a good opportunity to model what online class could look like for teachers. So that's kind of what it was based on. So I'm just going to kind of run through the screens real quickly just so you can kind of see. But since it's Google Classroom about Google, you'll see that that theme stays true. So I did a welcome, kind of an announcement. One thing I did notice that maybe with announcements you could use it more for formative assessment or learning, and use the other for summative. Maybe that would be a good idea. So you'll see announcements right off the bat because it's more about gathering information and learning. So you see Chrome versus Google accounts and tools. I've added videos. Tried to experiment a little bit with turning things in, or here I just had teachers make comments, and each others could see each other's comments then and be able to share that. And then I also did like assignments now where they could actually start driving into learning more about search results tools and the research tools and that type of stuff. So I broke it down into about 10 segments. If you would do an analogy to a class, that may be 10 different days of classrooms. This was a 3-hour PD session. So if you look at it that way, and you'll see things that have been turned in and not turned in. So this was 3 hours, and that's kind of what that looks like. So you can add those products that you need to, documents, videos from YouTube, those type of things. So it worked out really well, I felt, for us. So I'm going to go ahead and turn file share off, and let's go back to us. So Jason, that's kind of what I saw as a good way to be able to use it for PD.
Thanks. I think that's a really cool way to do it. And the other thing to point out is you can add people to your class later after that PD session. Isn't that right?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, I did that. There was 3 or 4 people that couldn't be at the live PD. So I told them, I said that I'd set it up. So I went ahead. They were included in the classroom anyway. So I told them just go ahead and do it as an online class. Worked out well.
I'd like to thank Christy Burton for joining us on this episode of Tech on the Side. As always, special thank you to Cindy Doder for co-hosting. If you'd like to learn more about Google Classroom or take a more in-depth look at Google Classrooms, just leave a message below. And remember, stay tuned and stay connected. If you have any questions, requests, or just want to see what I'm up to, connect with me at any of these social media avenues. And if you just can't get enough, check out my Flipboard magazine, Tech on the Side, where you can find all sorts of fantastic technology tidbits and more.